You heard there that I believe that the left has contempt for President Trump. Joining us now, Karl Rove, Fox News contributor. Karl, I think it's because they are desperate. What say you?
Well, I think they are over the top, and I think it's in large part because they don't have a program of their own. You mentioned it earlier, they lack a growth agenda. When your agenda is single-payer health care for America, and that's about it, you don't have a comprehensive agenda that speaks to the concerns and desires and ambitions of the middle class in America, and that's where the Democrats are. No program except resistance to Trump and anger at Trump, and it feeds on itself, and the more over the top it gets, the better it is for the Republicans and for the president. At some point, they'll wake up from their stupidity, but probably not for a while.
That's a strong word there, Karl. Stupidity, very strong. Yeah.
Well, it is stupid. I mean, you know, parties that lose elections generally try and get back on their feet by examining themselves, finding out what went wrong, and then fixing those problems and offering a positive agenda to the American people. Now, they may be okay after looking at Virginia and saying, well, all we had to do was be angry about Trump and we turned out voters. But over the course of the next 11 months between now and the 2018 midterms, my suspicion is anger at Trump is not going to be enough.
Okay. Now, Paul Ryan, in a radio interview 2 days ago, he says the Republicans next year are going to tackle reining in social spending. I think the left is going to attack that vigorously, right?
Absolutely, but I think he's right. In March, the CBO did a study for the next decade, and they said that federal revenues would be roughly $43 trillion. The tax cut will take roughly $1 trillion of it on a mostly static model, but they said that spending would be $52 trillion, so roughly $9 trillion more than their estimated revenue. And of that, 70% of the budget today is mandatory. But within a decade, it'll grow to nearly 80%. 78% of the budget will be mandatory. 78% increase in in mandatory spending over the next decade, and 18% increase in discretionary spending. So the mandatory part of the budget, the entitlements, are on autopilot. And unless we do something to moderate, not cut them from their current levels, but moderate their future growth, that deficit is going to just simply continue to grow and grow and be a larger percentage of our GDP than it is today. Today, it's about 74% of GDP. It was 40% of GDP when Barack Obama came into office. We're on a trajectory that's not good for our country, and we could solve it by moderating the future growth of spending, not by cutting it from its absolute levels today.
Would you give us your comment on what Gary Cohn told us about an hour ago? He said, look, they're talking about lowering the top rate of tax to 35% as a way of letting us keep at least some of the state and local tax deduction. Your comment?
Well, look, I think it's important to lower the top rate because, look, what we've done with the tax bill on the individual side is really has demand side effects. We've taken a bunch of people off the tax rolls who had modest tax burdens. We've kept middle-class taxpayers, given them a modest tax cut. But the energy that's going to drive the economy is to cut the top rate. And there ought to be an absolute limit to how much the government can take from any one individual. If it can take 39% from the so-called 1%, it can take 39% from anybody. So I'm in favor of lowering the top rate. I think it will add to economic growth, and I think it's a question of fairness. But I understand the political difficulties. When you got the President of the United States saying, I don't want a tax cut that will benefit people like me, then people like him and a lot of people who don't make near as much as him are going to be negatively affected. I hope they lower the top rate further than they have in the Senate bill.
But we are going to get the tax deal done by Christmas or certainly by New Year, yes?
I believe by Christmas, yes.
Oh, good. Okay, Karl Rove, thanks for joining us, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. I must say one thing, Stuart, before you go. Yep. I know you're both of you are U.S. citizens, but when I hear two expatriate Brits talk about keeping their powder dry, are you either going to blow up Parliament or are you the redcoats on the way to Concord and Lexington? I don't know. Either way, it makes me a little nervous when you guys start talking about gunpowder.
Don't be nervous. Rest assured, Karl, I will never, ever wear a red suit on this program. That's a fact.
There we go.
Thank you, Karl. You're all right.